Hey, Texas Study students. This is Coach Signs, welcoming you back to another one of our video lessons. Today's video lesson is Chapter 10.2 and the Goliad Massacre. While Santana fought the Texans at the Alamo, right there in San Antonio, General Urrea's army took the Atascosito Road, right here, and marched northeast. Now, we have the two roads, right? The Camino Real, which was the old San Antonio Road, and the Atascosito Road. Santa Anna was here and trying to drive the Texans this way, while he had Urrea and his army come up through the Atascosito Road and try to drive both the Texans from both roads into Louisiana and into what is the United States, away from Mexico. Now, General Urrea's first run and battle against the Texans took place in the city of San Patricio, where on February 27th, he defeated 50 Texans. And not only that, just a few short days later, on March 2nd, he defeated another 50 Texans. Now, after those two consecutive victories, Urrea's army then continued toward the Presidio of Goliad, which is pictured here in this picture today. This Presidio is still located, as you can see, it's a present-day picture. It's still upright like that. It's still in really good shape. Now, at this Presidio of Goliad, this is in the city of Goliad, Texas, that is where Colonel Fannin had and led 300 Texan soldiers. Now, Colonel Fannin had received a letter from William B. Travis asking for reinforcements at the Alamo. Here in this picture is a picture of Colonel Fannin himself. Now, after reading this letter from William B. Travis, on February 28th, Fannin and his men set out to go help the people of the Alamo, the soldiers of the Alamo. But, unfortunately, on their way over there, their wagon broke down and supplies were running out. That means as they were going over there, their wagon just completely breaks, and while they're there, the supplies ran out during that time. Now, while there, Colonel Fannin decided to send 30 of his soldiers to the city of Refugio to help out with some of the civilians being attacked there. Now, Colonel Fannin had found out that Urrea was sending men up there, so Colonel Fannin, sent another 100 men to help the Texans at Refugio defend against Urrea. Unfortunately, Urrea's men and his army were just too strong. The men tried to retreat. Colonel Fannin's men tried to retreat, but were captured and sent to Goliad. They were captured and had to surrender, like you can see here, the men in these pictures. Now, it's truly unfortunate for these men and for Colonel Fannin, because they were trying to help the people of the Alamo, right? The soldiers at the Alamo. But on their way there, they broke down, and then they heard of other people who were a little bit closer at Refugio that needed help. So essentially, they're just trying to help, but they get caught up, and then they get captured, and they get sent back to where they had originally come from in Goliad. Even if Colonel Fannin had tried to get the wagon back together and get to the Alamo, it would have been too late, because the Alamo would have already been destroyed by the Mexican army and Santa Anna. Now, on March 14th, Sam Houston ordered for Colonel Fannin and his men to retreat to the city of Victoria because of how General Urrea had been attacking them. Here you see a picture of Sam Houston himself with some troops. Now, Sam Houston, it's not that he was afraid of the Mexican army or of Urrea, General Urrea. It's just that he wanted to organize the Texan soldiers and train them before fighting the Mexican army. He knew exactly what type of soldiers he had, and they were a militia, unprofessional, not trained. So he wanted to take a step back and look at what he had and just kind of coach them up and train them a little bit before fighting the Mexican army. This is why he had ordered Colonel Fannin to retreat back to the city of Victoria. Now, this is where we see where Colonel Fannin had made an unwise decision in disobeying Sam Houston's order to retreat to Victoria. he decided to stay in Goliad and in that area, and that ends up coming back and hurting Colonel Fannin. 5 days later, Colonel Fannin comes to his senses and finally began to retreat with his 300 troops. Now, on their way to Victoria, they laid to rest at a creek called Coleto Creek. Now, the reason that he had stopped on this journey to Victoria, he just stopped so that his men, his horses, could rest up a little bit, they get some water, freshen up, and then hit the road again on their way to Victoria. While the troops were resting, General Urrea and his men surrounded their camp, right? And his 300 troops of Colonel Fannin were attacked by Urrea's army at the Coleta Creek. As we can see here in this picture we have right here, we can see how the creek looked like and what it was kind of mapped out. Here in this next picture, we can see exactly how the Mexican army and Urrea's army had the Colonel Fannin and his men surrounded. The blue is the Mexican and Urrea's army. The red was Fannin and his army. Now, as you can see, what Fannin did, he tried to get his men together in a square to be able to defend themselves all around in this creek. Now, after the gunfight and everything was going on, by the next morning, Fannin himself and the rest of the men surrendered. Him and his surviving men were taken to the city of Goliad. Well, many of the Texans' captives believed that they would not be executed because they surrendered and did not fight to the death. Now, many historians have written that General Urrea had promised and made a deal with Colonel Fannin that his men would not be executed on their way back to Goliad. However, Santana had other plans himself. Santana ordered all Texan captives in Goliad to be shot to death. Now, 1 week later, on a Palm Sunday, which is a religious Sunday for the Catholic faith, on March 27th of 1836, the Texans were split into 3 groups and marched out in front of the Presidio and shot. Well, unfortunately, while these soldiers were being walked out, many of them thought that they were actually going to be let out and free to go back to where they came from, which was the United States. But they thought wrong. Santana ordered for them to be shot as they walked out of the Presidio. What a hard way to die, thinking that you had your freedom. Now, here in this picture, you can see as the troops were walking out, right, unarmed, didn't have any way to defend themselves, you see the Mexican troops ordered to shoot them. This is why it is considered as the Goliad Massacre, because the Mexican troops who are heavily armed are attacking a group of Texan soldiers who did not have any weapons whatsoever on them. So this is why it's always been considered, or has been considered, as the Goliad Massacre. Troops massacring an unarmed crowd. The next thing that the soldiers did is when they returned to the Presidio, they went back and they got all the wounded, they laid them down, and they shot them. They executed all wounded soldiers from the Presidio. They executed a total of about 40 wounded soldiers. Now, in total, a total of 342 total Texan soldiers were massacred, and many of their bodies were just burned instead of actually given a proper burial. Now, what the Mexican soldiers had done was they saved Colonel Fannin to be the last one to be executed. Here you see a picture of him where they tied him up, they sat him on this chair, and they blindfolded Colonel Fannin, and as he was supposed to be the last one to be executed. Well, before Colonel Fannin was executed, he had 3 requests from the Mexican soldiers. You might want to write these down next to this section, guys. Now, the 3 requests were, number 1, he not be shot in the face during his execution. Number 2, that all of his personal belongings would be sent to his family. And number 3, that he would to be given a proper Christian burial. Now, in all honesty, guys, do you think that the Mexican soldiers actually gave him his 3 requests? That's right. No, they didn't. They didn't even listen to him. The Mexican soldiers were very cruel and very harsh with him. What they did was they shot Colonel Fannin in the face. They took all his belongings to keep for themselves. And all they did was throw his body in with the rest of the soldiers and burned him as well. Now, a total of 28 soldiers were able to escape the Goliad Massacre. Okay? Now, an additional number of soldiers were actually spared their lives. 17 soldiers within the Goliad at the time were given the right to survive and to continue on with life. They were not killed, right? So this is how we know these 45 soldiers that were either escaped or given their opportunity to just leave freely. This is how we know exactly, because of their accounts, this is why we know exactly what happened at the Goliad Massacre. Now, with that, this concludes our lesson on chapter 10.2, the Goliad Massacre. Make sure that you subscribe on my YouTube channel, Coach Signs Altogether, and you like it. This is Coach Signs, signing out.